On the day he proposed, I found a hidden camera in our bedroom. He'd been secretly selling our intimate moments online, bragging she'll never know. When I cried, he sneered. Content is content. Even his sister mocked me, saying, "At least you looked." I collected every clip, copyright receipt, and payout statement, and uploaded it all to his mom's Facebook. When I tell people the story, they always focus on the proposal, how romantic it must have been, how I must have been crying with joy. But the truth is, I was crying for a very different reason that day. It was a Saturday in late March, one of those early spring days in Nashville when the air feels soft but the lights still cold. My boyfriend, Ryan, had spent the week being weirdly attentive. Fresh flowers, dinners out, even cleaned my car. I thought he was just making up for a fight we'd had 2 weeks earlier about him being distracted. Now I know what that meant. That morning, he told me to dress up. Said we were going to someplace special. I thought it might be an early birthday thing. He kept grinning like he had a secret. I had no idea how big that secret really was. Before we left, I went into the bedroom to grab my earrings. I dropped one under the nightstand. When I bent down to reach for it, I saw something, a small black dot under the lamp, right where it met the base. It looked like the tiniest hole. At first, I thought it was just part of the design, but then I saw the faint red light inside it. My stomach dropped. I picked it up. It was light smooth, almost like a piece of plastic. And then I turned it over. A tiny switch, a slot for a microSD card. My hands went numb. I just stood there, staring at it. Ryan was in the kitchen, humming, talking about where we'd go for lunch after the surprise. I didn't even have words. I just slipped the thing into my pocket and told myself I'd look later. The proposal happened that afternoon, at Percy Warner Park. He'd set up a picnic, candles, music, the whole thing. People were clapping when he got down on one knee. I smiled through it, said yes, because that's what you do when your entire body is in shock and you're trying not to fall apart in public. Later that night, after the champagne, after the fake smiles, I went into our room again. He was in the shower. I sat on the floor with my laptop and slid that tiny card into the slot. What came up first was a thumbnail, a still frame from our bed. My bed, I clicked it, and then I saw myself. Naked, laughing, reaching for him. It took a full second to realize I wasn't holding a phone, that it wasn't a selfie, that it was from above, the same angle as the lamp. The next file started automatically. Then another. There were dozens, different nights, different angles. Every moment I thought was private, sacred even, was right there, catalogued. My ears rang. But that wasn't even the worst part. I saw folder names, top-tier clips, best reactions, fan requests, and then at the bottom a folder labeled uploads. Inside it were receipts, payout statements, account usernames, titles, tags. One file caught my eye. A screen recording of a chat between him and some anonymous account. Ryan, she'll never know lol. Content is content. User, damn dude, that's your girl. Ryan, yeah, fiancé soon. Gotta get her on camera before she gets boring. I don't remember crying at first. It was like my mind detached from my body. The only thing I remember was the sound of the shower running, and my heart pounding so loud I thought it would echo through the walls. I opened more folders. Every single thing we'd ever done in that bed, every touch, every kiss, he'd filmed it. Some had been uploaded weeks ago. Some had thousands of views. Thousands. When he came out of the bathroom, towel around his waist, smiling like he'd just won something, I was still sitting on the floor. He saw the laptop, froze for half a second, then rolled his eyes. "You went through my stuff," he said, almost bored. I couldn't speak. I just looked at him. The screen was still open behind me, his chat visible. "You recorded us," I finally said. My voice cracked so bad it didn't even sound like mine. He smirked. "Oh, come on, don't act like it's that big a deal." "You posted it online," I said. He shrugged. "Content is content. People do it all the time." Something in me broke then. I screamed so loud the neighbor's dog started barking. He didn't flinch, didn't apologize, just grabbed a shirt and muttered, "Jesus, it's not like I used your name." I think that's when the crying started. He walked out the door while I was still shaking, leaving me surrounded by the glow of that open laptop, the proof of what he'd done. And then, an hour later, while I was sitting on the kitchen floor, trying to breathe, his sister called me. I thought maybe she'd heard and wanted to help, but the first thing she said was, "At least you looked good." Then she laughed. That's when something inside me snapped back into place. The fear burned off. What was left wasn't sadness, it was precision. I backed up every file, every receipt, every transaction, every disgusting message. I made folders, I made copies. And while he was sleeping at his friend's place that night, probably telling himself I'd get over it, I was planning exactly how I'd ruin him. I already knew how I'd start. His mother worshipped him. She was always posting pictures of him, my successful son, bragging about his media projects. So I took one deep breath, logged into Facebook, and created a post that would change everything. It started with, "Since everyone loves Ryan's media work, I thought his family and friends should see what kind of content he really makes." Then I attached everything, every file, every chat, every payout statement. And I hit post. What happened next made the proposal look like a dress rehearsal for the real explosion. We met at a bar in East Nashville, one of those places with exposed brick and a DJ who insisted it was still indie. He was easy to like. Ryan had that kind of face people forgive. Strong jaw, a crooked smile that suggested he just said something he probably shouldn't have, and eyes that looked like they were always calculating whether the room was worth staying in. He worked in media, which meant different things depending on who he was talking to. To his mother, he was a content creator and a hustler. To his friends, he was building a platform. To me, at first, he was just funny and flattering in that old-fashioned way where it felt like he was paying attention only to you. The first 6 months were the stuff rom-coms are made of, except quieter, less cinematic. He learned how I like my coffee. He showed up to my sister's graduation even though he'd met her only once. He moved slowly at the beginning, texts that were close but not clingy, dinners that felt carefully chosen, not obligatory. He introduced me to records I pretended to like and left notes on my car that were supposed to be cute. He introduced me as my girlfriend and watched the small domestic rituals, me chopping vegetables, him making a joke about burning garlic, with a soft look of ownership I didn't find predatory then. I liked being noticed. If you had asked me at the time whether he'd ever hurt me, I would have laughed. That was the other thing about Ryan. He knew how to cultivate trust. He was always 2 steps ahead in small ways. He'd anticipate my mood and send me a song or a meme that landed exactly where I was. He curated his image like a feed, grainy photos of coffee cups, landscapes of nowhere, arty shots of him half smiling at a camera. It made me think he was introspective, that he maybe even felt things the way I did. He came from a family that loved to perform being small-town wholesome. His mom, Linda, lived in Hendersonville. Sunday dinners, church cookies, the kind of woman who would plaster his graduation photos on Facebook with 34 hashtags. She adored him the way parents adore the version of their child who never screws up. His sister, Jen, was a year older, sharp-tongued and lean, the kind of woman who could be real in a way that felt like a betrayal and a gift at the same time. They both took Ryan's side on most things, acted like his cheer squad, and told stories that made him heroic in the small domestic myths families make for one another. At first, the little lies were nothing. "I'm running late," he'd say, and show up an hour later with pizza and contrition. "I texted you," he'd tell me, when his phone showed no outgoing messages. He had a knack for plausible deniability. He'd flip blame like a switch. An omitted fact became an honest misremembering. And I forgave him because forgiveness felt like maintenance of a life that, for the most part, made me feel safe. We moved in together after a year. Moving in did that thing it does. It showed you the parts of someone that don't get airbrushed by dates. I learned his habits. He never washed his jeans. He rearranged my record collection for feng shui. He also left his laptop on the kitchen table like a shrine. The screensaver was always some project, thumbnails, waveforms, a half-edited video with a title like BTS, Lifestyle Shoot. When I asked about the projects, he'd tell me grand things. He framed every little hustle as creative work, an honorable grind. I believed him because he made it look like ambition, and ambition is flattering. That first winter, I noticed he had a second email, just a string of numbers and a handle I didn't recognize. I assumed it was business. When I asked, he said it was an old account he used for freelance. I didn't push. People have accounts, people have lives beyond the person standing in front of you, but there were other signs. He'd get up in the middle of the night to check messages. He'd take long calls outside. When I asked about the calls, he'd smile and say it was a client. He was always on deadline. He had the perfect cover for being secretive, creative work that required solitude and focus. There were moments, little ones that hinted at a darker texture to him. Once, he took a photo of me sleeping and told me it was cute. I laughed it off. Another time, he joked, light, casual, about how great things always looked on camera. He'd show me ad revenue numbers once, sliding a tablet across the table like he was sharing a private victory. He loved to be admired for his hustle. When I pointed out that he often filmed me when I didn't know it, my hair wet, my face bare, he'd say I was being dramatic, that I should be flattered. Flattered because I wasn't some airbrushed influencer, flattered because to him, everything was content. He'd always told me he wanted to be famous in a small, local way, enough to pay the rent, to validate him at parties. He told me he wanted to make art, or at least make money off of being personable. I believed him. I wanted to believe in him. Love has a way of making you a good historian of someone else's intentions. We catalog the best versions and file the rest away. We fell into routines. We had rituals. Saturday mornings were for markets in 12 South and cheap brunches, midday naps on the couch, and evenings where we tried to cook new recipes and failed spectacularly. He was affectionate in private, but there was a performative layer, kissing me in public like a prop. He'd jerk open the door for me in front of friends like he was demonstrating his manners. I liked the performance because it meant he was proud of me in front of other people. The first time I felt truly off was the week he started deleting a lot of files from his laptop. He said his hard drive was full. He told me he was clearing junk, archiving. He moved folders into an external drive and hid it under a pile of records. I didn't look. I told myself it was normal. People clean their computers. People have secrets. They don't all have to be malicious. Then, once, a friend mentioned seeing a clip on a platform that made my skin crawl. The friend described it as weird, voyeuristic stuff and joked about privacy. I laughed because laughing is a way to keep your face. But inside, there was a hollow feeling, a tiny echo that something was off. I tried to bring it up to Ryan later, jokingly, but he became defensive, distant. He told me I was reading too much into things. We were together nearly 3 years before the proposal. In that time, his behavior oscillated between deeply tender and casually dismissive. There were moments where his affection felt absolute. He would do impossible small things when I was sick, bringing soup, sitting through terrible daytime TV with me, holding me while I cried about my mother's car accident or my job when I was scared about layoffs. Those moments were why I trusted him. They were proof that he could be tender, that he could be there when the storm came. But there was this other pattern, this contour of his character that kept getting sharper. His need to monetize everything, the way he reduced moments to metrics. He would laugh at someone's reaction and say, "That's a 5-star moment." He would talk about audience retention over dinner. He'd describe people as engagement in a way that made me feel small, like a moving part. I chalked it up to his work, because labeling someone's weakness work is easier than admitting its cruelty. If you ask me now what the real signs were, what I missed, the honest answer is this: I saw the right pieces, but I framed them into a story that made him the hero. I wanted my life to make sense with him in it. I wanted the simple narrative: he's flawed, but fundamentally good. I wanted that so badly I edited the truth to fit. 2 months before he proposed, he started acting extra careful. Not careful in a sweet way, careful like someone who's about to pull off a long con. He researched locks online. He installed little gadgets around the house that he called safety upgrades. He scheduled a work trip for a weekend and then canceled, saying he wanted to stay. When he came back from the canceled trip, he was glowingly attentive, almost euphoric. I thought it was about me, about how he appreciated being home. I didn't know what I was comfortable ignoring. People always ask me why I didn't leave sooner. It's a fair question and one that stings. The real answer is messy: denial, hope, fear. I rationalized. I loved him, or the version of him that was sometimes visible. I believed in the domestic future we were building: shared Netflix, a joint account, a plant that didn't die. I believed that people can change. I believed in explanations that made sense, not the ones that would have forced me to confront that I'd been living with someone who looked at me like a performance. So when he proposed, on a hill with a picnic blanket and those cheap sparkling cider flutes, I said yes. I said yes because, in that moment, the version of us being perfect felt possible. I said yes because I wanted it to be true. What I didn't know then was that the careful behavior, the second email, the late-night calls, the secretive gadgets, those were not about protecting us. They were about scaffolding something else. They were the scaffolding for a secret, so big it would burn the life we'd built down to ash. That secret waited in the dark until the day I found the camera in the lamp. And the moment I slid that microSD card into my laptop, something in my head rewound everything I'd been willing to forgive and made it readable in a way I couldn't unsee. I started clicking through the files like a surgeon trying to map the damage. Every clip was a new wound. Every folder name told a story of shrink-wrapped betrayal. Every receipt was a ledger that turned our intimacy into currency. But before I could do anything with that knowledge, before I could clear the air or call someone or make sense of the legal landscape and the humiliation, the phone buzzed on the table. It was a message from Jen, his sister. It read, "Mom texted. She says she's throwing an engagement party this weekend. So proud of you too, need details." I stared at the message, at the casual punctuation, at the exclamation point that pressed joy into the world as if nothing had happened. Then my cursor blinked on the laptop, right over the file named Uploads, last week PAYMENTS. I didn't sleep that night. Not a minute. I sat in the dark, the light of the laptop screen bouncing off the walls, turning my bedroom, the same one where those videos were made, into a kind of crime scene. It was a crime scene, really. I just didn't have the words for it yet. At 3 a.m., I started cataloging everything. I made folders, one for files, one for receipts, one for screenshots. I labeled them by date and timestamp. I downloaded everything I could find tied to his username. The more I looked, the more I realized this wasn't just some one-off experiment. It was organized, monetized. He'd been doing it for months, probably longer. There were thumbnails, hashtags, even clip descriptions. It was professional, and I was the product. By dawn, my hands were shaking so bad I could barely type, but I wasn't crying anymore. The fear had calcified into something colder, focused. My therapist once said that shock doesn't always look like panic. Sometimes it looks like control. That morning, I understood what she meant. I knew I couldn't confront him right away. I had to let him think I didn't know. So when he came back later that morning, I acted distant but quiet. He noticed, of course, asked if I was hungover from the champagne. I said yes. He smirked and kissed my forehead like I was a pet. That kiss, it was the last time he touched me. He spent the day talking to his mom, probably bragging about the proposal. I overheard him telling her, "She was crying, Mom. It was perfect." He had no idea those tears weren't joy. By noon, his mom had already made a Facebook post. "My baby is engaged. So proud of Ryan and his beautiful fiancée, Madison. Engaged, blessed, love wins," hundreds of likes. Comments rolling in. Little heart emojis and "you two are goals" messages from people who had no idea what he'd done. I stared at it for a long time. I could have commented right then. Could have blown it all up. But that felt too small, too reactive. He needed to feel it, the same exposure he'd forced on me. The next few days were a performance. He went to work, I stayed quiet. I pretended to be busy with wedding Pinterest boards, texting my sister, taking calls from friends who wanted details. Inside, I was planning. I needed evidence, real evidence. Enough to make it undeniable, unspinnable. So I followed the money. I logged into his PayPal and Venmo accounts while he was at work. He'd saved the passwords in Chrome. There were transactions with captions like custom content, bonus tips, monthly share. And every username was a breadcrumb. I cross-referenced the usernames with the upload platforms, and there it was. A verified creator profile with his face blurred in the profile pic, but not blurred enough. His tattoo, a geometric wolf on his left wrist, was visible in multiple clips. Every payout went to the same email. The one he told me was his old freelance account. There were over $28,000 in deposits over 8 months. $28,000 made off of me. That's when the disgust turned into rage. Not loud rage, not yelling or throwing things. The quiet kind that feels like static under your skin. The kind that makes you calculate. That night, he came home with takeout and said he wanted to go live together. Apparently, one of his followers wanted a Q and A with the fiancé. I refused. He laughed and called me camera shy. Camera shy. The irony was suffocating. 2 days later, his sister Jen stopped by with champagne and fake enthusiasm. She was wearing her usual sarcastic grin, the one that never reached her eyes. "So," she said, "you two made it official." I told Ryan I didn't think he had it in him. She looked around the apartment like she was casing it, then noticed the lamp, the one that used to hide the camera. "This is new?" she asked. I looked her dead in the eye. "Yeah," I said. "Had to replace it." She didn't even blink, just smirked. "Oh, yeah, he's real particular about his setups." Setups. The word hit me like a slap. I studied her face. That smirk wasn't confusion, it was recognition. She knew. Maybe not everything, but enough. Maybe she thought it was funny, maybe she'd even helped. Before she left, she turned to me and said, "You two really are good together, you bring out his creative side." Then she winked. That's when I decided the revenge couldn't just be about exposure. It had to be surgical, public, irreversible. That night I made a new folder, for Facebook. I copied everything, videos, receipts, payout statements, screenshots of his comments, the chat where he bragged, "She'll never know." Content is content. But I didn't post it yet, not until I was sure it would stick. I needed to protect myself legally, too. So I called a lawyer, one of my dad's old friends. I didn't tell him everything, just said I suspected my partner had been recording me without consent. He told me, "If you can prove distribution, that's a felony in Tennessee. Don't delete anything." Felony. That word tasted electric. I didn't tell him the emotional part. The humiliation, the betrayal. I just thanked him and hung up. Meanwhile, Ryan was doubling down on the performance. Every day he posted about our engagement. Photos, captions about finding the one, cheesy love quotes. He was building a story online, his version of us. The audience believed it. So I built one too, my version, the truth I kept gathering. I joined one of the platforms he was using with a fake account and found his videos. They were tagged with phrases like "real girlfriend doesn't know," "caught on cam," "authentic reactions." The comment sections made me sick. People asked for specific angles or scenes, and Ryan, or whatever username he used, replied like a salesman. "Got more of her coming soon," winking face. She has no clue. That's the fun part. The rage that followed wasn't cinematic, it wasn't screaming. It was the kind of rage that makes your blood go cold. The kind where you stop being afraid of consequences because there's nothing left to lose. I backed up everything to a USB drive, sealed it in an envelope, and dropped it in a safety deposit box under my name. I wasn't stupid. I knew how he could twist things if this went public. I needed proof that couldn't vanish with a keystroke. Then I waited. A week after the proposal, his mom called to invite me to the big engagement dinner. I said yes. It was the perfect stage. Ryan had been bragging to his followers about new projects coming soon. I watched his follower count climb while I packed my laptop bag with one thing, the drive. He thought I was nervous about marriage. I was nervous about how fast the internet connection would be at his mom's house. When the night came, he looked perfect. Pressed shirt, fake charm, his hand on my lower back as we walked up the porch steps like nothing had ever happened. His mom hugged me, called me daughter-to-be. His sister poured champagne. Everyone was smiling. But when I looked at him, at how effortlessly he could fake it, how confidently he performed innocence in front of his family, it clicked. He wasn't scared of being caught. He didn't even think he could be. He'd built his whole life on control, on the certainty that people like me would always be too ashamed to speak. He didn't know who he'd made. Because the woman sitting at that dinner table wasn't his fiancée anymore. She was his reckoning. And that reckoning started with a single post I'd drafted and scheduled to go live halfway through dessert. It began. "For everyone who thinks Ryan is a creative genius, here's what he's really been creating." I hit schedule. And then I smiled across the table, raised my glass, and said, "To honesty." The night of that dinner started like a script he'd written for himself. Ryan at the head of the table, his mom beaming, his sister swirling her wine like she was watching her favorite TV show. Everyone laughed too loud, complimented the roast too much, and kept circling back to him. Ryan this, Ryan that. It was like being inside his highlight reel. I played my part. I smiled. I nodded. I looked lucky. But under the table, my phone buzzed. Post published. It was 8:27 p.m. The scheduled post on his mom's Facebook, set to public, was live. A minute passed. Then two. No one at the table knew yet. Then Ryan's mom's phone dinged. Once. Twice. Then it wouldn't stop. The notification sound went off like a fire alarm, Facebook, Messenger, texts. She frowned, picked it up, and her smile faltered. "What's this?" she said softly. Ryan froze mid-sentence. Jen looked over her mother's shoulder, her expression flickering from curiosity to recognition to wide-eyed panic. And I watched, quiet, steady, as everything I'd been carrying for weeks began to detonate. His mom's face turned pale. "Ryan, what is this?" she whispered. Ryan laughed nervously. "What do you mean?" She turned the phone toward him. "On the screen, the post, my post. This is Ryan's real work. Every video he's uploaded was recorded without my knowledge or consent. These are the receipts, the usernames, the payments. Every cent he made came from violating me. I'm not his fiancée. I'm his victim." Underneath were screenshots, clips blurred but recognizable, payment logs, and his disgusting chat messages. His mother gasped, hands trembling so badly she nearly dropped the phone. Jen covered her mouth but didn't look surprised. Not really. More like someone realizing the secret wasn't secret anymore. "Mom, that's fake," Ryan blurted, voice cracking. "She's lying, she's crazy. You know how she gets when she's emotional." "Ryan." His mom's voice cut through him like a blade. "Tell me this isn't real." He stood up so fast his chair scraped the floor. It's not what it looks like. She's just mad about something, But his words were drowned out by the sound of her phone still buzzing. Comment after comment. People tagging others, sharing the post. Within minutes, it had hundreds of reactions. Then Jen spoke. Quietly, coldly, "You said she'd never find out." Everyone turned to her. Ryan blinked. "What?" Jen stared straight ahead. "You told me she'd never find out. You said it was harmless, just performance art." That it didn't show her face. "I told you to stop." The room went silent. His mom's hand dropped to her lap. "You knew." Jen looked between us, guilt twisting her mouth. "I didn't think he was posting it. I thought it was God, I don't know, some kind of weird project." "Jen, shut up," Ryan hissed, but she kept going. "You told me you were going to delete everything after the proposal. You said it was just to build hype for your platform." I could barely breathe. There it was, the proof I didn't even know I needed. She had known. She'd helped hide it. "Wait," I said, my voice low but sharp. "You're telling me you knew I was being recorded, that you just let it happen?" Jen's face crumpled. "I didn't think you'd care. I thought he told you." Ryan slammed his hand on the table. "Enough. Both of you are overreacting." His mom stood up. "Overreacting? Ryan, she's saying you recorded her without consent. And you," she pointed at Jen, "you knew." Jen started crying, the kind of panicked tears people cry when they realize the story's turning against them. "He said it was his business, Mom. He said she agreed to it." Ryan grabbed my arm then, hard, too hard. "You think this is going to ruin me?" he hissed. His voice dropped to a whisper only I could hear. "You think anyone's going to believe you? They'll see what you posted and call you a jealous ex. They'll say you're bitter." I looked him dead in the eyes and smiled just slightly. "Then I guess you'd better check your email." He frowned. Because while he was standing there trying to salvage his reputation in that kitchen, my scheduled posts hadn't stopped with his mom's Facebook. I'd also queued everything for his personal Facebook, his LinkedIn, his professional website, and every group chat he shared with family, colleagues, and followers. And on top of that, I'd sent the full evidence folder, including his payout logs and chat history, to an investigator my lawyer recommended. Ryan's phone started blowing up, text after text, ping after ping, his color drained. He opened one, then another, his jaw dropped. "Madison, what did you do?" "What you taught me," I said. "Content is content." His mother was sobbing now, not delicate tears, real guttural crying that filled the room. "Get out," she said. "Both of you, get out of my house." Jen tried to speak, but her mother shouted, "You too." I stood up slowly. Ryan reached out, desperate, but I stepped back. "Don't touch me." Then I turned to his mother. "I'm sorry you had to find out like this. I really am. But you raised someone who thinks women are content. Maybe think about why." And I walked out. Outside, the night was cold. My phone kept vibrating with notifications, shares, messages, reporters, friends. It was spreading, fast. By the time I got to my car, it had been shared nearly 10,000 times. But here's where the twist really hit, because I thought the worst was over. I thought exposure would destroy him. I didn't know the next thing I'd uncover, something that made my stomach drop all over again. Because when I got home that night, there was an envelope waiting on my doorstep. No return address. Inside, a single flash drive, labeled Backup Ryan's Archive. And the first file inside wasn't a video of me. It was a video of someone else. The envelope wasn't just sitting there, it was placed right in the center of my doormat, like whoever left it wanted me to see it immediately. It was raining, and yet the paper wasn't wet. That meant it hadn't been there long. Maybe minutes. For a second I thought Ryan had come to threaten me, or maybe it was someone trying to intimidate me into deleting the posts. But when I picked up the envelope and saw his handwriting on the label, his neat, slanted print, the way he always wrote his R's like tiny triangles, I felt a chill run down my arms. Backup Ryan's Archive. I almost didn't want to plug it in, but curiosity and anger are cousins, they drive the same motion. When I finally connected it to my laptop, I saw folders, hundreds of them, not just mine. Each one was named after a woman. Some I recognized from mutual friends, others were strangers. The timestamps went back years. I clicked the first folder. The thumbnails made me sick. Hotel rooms, bedrooms, cars. All filmed from hidden angles, some obviously secret, some handheld, all clearly without consent. And then I realized something worse. Some of the women looked young. Not underage, but barely adults. Freshman young. I sat there shaking, trying to breathe through the nausea. It wasn't just me. I wasn't his first. I was just his longest-running series. That's when the revenge stopped being personal. It became warfare. By the next morning, my post had gone viral. It had over 100,000 shares and was trending on local Nashville groups. Half the comments were outrage, half were disbelief. Some were cruel, people asking for proof, people calling me bitter, people minimizing it. But the tide was shifting. Others were defending me, tagging law enforcement pages, demanding accountability. Then I got a call from an unknown number. "Miss Hayes," a voice said. "This is Detective Reeves with Metro PD. We've received multiple reports regarding your online post about a man named Ryan Jacobs. We need to talk." That was the moment it turned real. I met with her the next day. She was calm, sharp, methodical. She asked for every file I had, and when I showed her the flash drive, she went still. "This goes beyond what you posted," she said quietly. "If these women didn't consent, this is felony voyeurism, digital exploitation, and possibly trafficking if he profited. Do you understand how serious this is?" I nodded. She told me not to contact him, to stay quiet, to let the investigation happen. But I couldn't. Not yet. Not until I made sure the story couldn't die. Because I knew Ryan, his instinct was always control. If he felt cornered, he'd find a way to shift the narrative, to make himself the victim. So I started preparing for the counterattack. First, I reached out to a local journalist, a woman named Erin who'd written pieces about revenge porn laws and privacy violations in Tennessee. I told her I had evidence, names, payout records, and victims who didn't know yet that they were victims. She met me the same day at a coffee shop downtown. She didn't blink when I handed her the drive. She just asked one question. "Are you sure you want this public?" I didn't even hesitate. "Yes, he made me public without asking. I'm just returning the favor with consent this time." She nodded. Within 48 hours, the story was everywhere. Nashville content creator under investigation for non-consensual recordings. Multiple women identified in hidden camera scandal. Ryan's followers dropped from 50,000 to nothing. Sponsors pulled out. His brand collaborations evaporated. Every woman he'd ever filmed without consent started messaging me, at first confused, then horrified, then furious. We made a group chat. 23 of us. 23 women, all different, all blindsided. Some had dated him. Some had been one-night stands. One was his ex-girlfriend from years back. She told me he used to say he was making art about intimacy. Another said she'd found a hidden GoPro in his Airbnb months ago but never connected it to him. One girl, Jenna, was only 19 when he filmed her. She broke down in the chat, said she'd been living with the fear for years but could never prove it. That night, the chat turned into strategy. We weren't victims anymore, we were witnesses. We started collecting our evidence. Screenshots, DMs, bank transfers. He'd used the same usernames, same payout accounts, same comments. By the end of the week, we had enough data to trace everything back to him, IP addresses, timestamps, even videos he'd uploaded privately. Ryan wasn't careful. He thought he was untouchable, so we decided to make him feel the one thing he never thought possible, powerless. While the investigation was building, I planned something smaller, personal. I logged into one of his old creator accounts, one I'd found the password for in his email. It was still active. His content was still up, monetized, earning daily. So I posted a new video. A blank screen with the title, "The Creator Exposed, Coming Soon." And in the description, "This channel will soon feature a full exposé on Ryan Jacobs' exploitation of women. Stay tuned for interviews, proof, and justice." Then I changed the bio to, "This account no longer belongs to Ryan, it belongs to the truth." It took 2 hours for people to notice. Comments started pouring in. Then the platform suspended his entire account, pending investigation. That night, I received a string of texts from an unknown number. No name, but I knew the tone instantly. RYAN. "What the F asterisk are you doing? RYAN, you've ruined my life. RYAN, do you think anyone will believe you didn't know? RYAN, you were in those videos too. You're complicit." That last one made me laugh out loud. I typed back, "I didn't record anyone, I didn't profit off anyone, you did. And every receipt is timestamped, genius." He didn't respond after that, but the next morning something else happened. A new account, Anonymous, DM'd me on Instagram. The message was just one sentence: "He's trying to leave town." Attached was a photo. Ryan, standing outside a bus terminal with a duffel bag. I didn't know who sent it, but it didn't matter. The police already had his location from his digital footprint. They picked him up that afternoon. You'd think that's where the story ends. But it wasn't. Because 2 days later, another detective called me in. "We've found something," she said carefully. She pulled out a file and slid a photo across the table. It wasn't me. It wasn't any of the other women. It was a girl. 16. Filmed in the same setup, same lamp, same pattern. Only this time, the metadata showed the video was from before Ryan met me, and the account that uploaded it wasn't under his name. It was under his sister's. When Detective Reeves slid that photo across the table, I didn't breathe. I couldn't. At first, I thought I'd misheard her. "Wait," I said, my voice catching. "His sister's account," she nodded slowly. "The upload data ties back to a user named Gen Content. The payout routing matches an old joint account she shared with your ex. The timestamps start before you were in the picture, about 5 years ago." 5 years. That was before he'd even moved to Nashville. Before the media projects, before me. It meant this didn't start with him, or if it did, he wasn't the only one holding the camera. Reeves leaned forward. "We think the sister helped him set this up originally. She may have been his partner, financially, possibly logistically. The two accounts mirrored each other's activity for at least a year before your name appeared. It was like someone had reached into my chest and snapped something loose." I remembered her face that night at the dinner table, calm, almost expectant, as if she knew exactly what was about to happen but wanted to watch the fire catch. She'd said it like a joke, "You bring out his creative side." Now I knew what she meant. The next week blurred. Every morning, new articles. Every night, calls from other victims. The police had identified at least 32 women, maybe more. Ryan was in custody, but Jen was still free, claiming she was a consultant, that she'd had no idea what he was really doing. Except she did. When the detective asked if I'd be willing to testify, I said yes without thinking. I didn't want quiet justice. I wanted it loud. But privately, I started digging again. I couldn't stop. Some part of me needed to see it, how deep it went, how long she'd been part of it. And the deeper I looked, the uglier it got. In one of the backup drives, I found old folders predating my relationship. I shouldn't have opened them, but I did. The footage wasn't like mine. It wasn't polished. It was experimental. Darker, the camera didn't hide. Sometimes you could see 2 shadows, one filming, one directing. And in one clip, a female voice said, "Zoom in a little, guys like that." It wasn't just any voice. It was hers, Jen. I had to pause the video because my hands started shaking. All this time, I'd thought Ryan was the mastermind, the narcissistic sociopath exploiting people for profit. But now, I realized he wasn't working alone. He wasn't even the first one to do it. This wasn't his invention. It was hers. She'd built the system, he'd just scaled it. I met Erin, the journalist, again. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, then leaned back in her chair and said, "You realize this changes the whole story, right? This isn't just about one man's betrayal, it's a family business. Those words hit hard. Family business. The kind his mother bragged about, the kind they pretended was about media and content creation, the kind that paid for his car, his equipment, their lifestyle. Suddenly, his mom's blind loyalty made more sense. Maybe it wasn't just blindness. Maybe it was willful ignorance, because the money had been flowing for years. Aaron's story blew up again. Headlines everywhere. Nashville siblings accused in covert filming scheme. Content empire built on voyeurism, exploitation, and deceit. When Jen's name hit the press, she turned on Ryan instantly. Started giving interviews, claiming he'd manipulated her, that she'd been helping with editing but didn't know the videos were real. She painted herself as another victim, and people believed her. That was the second betrayal, different from his. His was physical, invasive, methodical. Hers was emotional, insidious, the kind of betrayal that pretends to be solidarity while twisting the knife deeper. Because when I posted the truth, she'd called me 2 days later, not to apologize but to warn me. I still remember her exact words. "You need to stop posting, Madison. You don't know who you're messing with." This goes beyond Ryan. When I asked what she meant, she just said, "You think he was the only one making money off this?" and hung up. That sentence kept me up for nights. Beyond Ryan, then came the real twist. A few weeks into the investigation, Aaron texted me a link at 2 a.m. "You're going to want to see this." It was a private group forum, invite only, buried behind layers of encryption. A community dedicated to authentic content. Men posting hidden recordings of their partners, girlfriends, strangers. And one of the admin handles caught my eye. J Content Original. It wasn't Ryan. It was Jen. She'd been running that network the entire time. Hundreds of creators, thousands of clips, a full operation. She wasn't some sidekick, she was the source. Ryan was just her face, her proxy. The boy genius she hid behind while building something far more sinister. The more I read, the clearer it became. She wasn't just condoning it, she was coaching others. Don't show her face. Blur the birthmarks. Keep metadata off before uploading. Use dummy payouts through family Venmos. She knew every detail, every loophole. Ryan might have recorded me, but Jen built the blueprint for all of it. I told the detective. They opened a second case. The FBI even got involved. But while the legal system moved slowly, the internet didn't. People started connecting dots, comparing usernames, timestamps, voices. Other women came forward, not just in Tennessee but across 3 other states. Some had known Ryan. Some had only known Jen. The outrage went national. Meanwhile, she kept trying to spin it. Posted statements about cancel culture, about media witch hunts. Even her mother defended her at first, claiming it was all a misunderstanding of creative expression. But then one of Jen's old collaborators leaked a voice memo, her own words, laughing. "I started the business because there's always a market for what people aren't supposed to see. It's not wrong, it's profitable." I listened to that clip 20 times, trying to find humanity in her tone. There was none, no guilt, no hesitation, just pure calculation. And that's when I knew if Ryan deserved public ruin, Jen deserved something colder, something permanent, because exposure wasn't enough anymore. She'd built an empire of humiliation. So I'd show her what it felt like when her own empire turned against her. That night, I started planning her fall. I still had admin access to one of the sites she moderated under her fake alias, the one where she'd posted tutorials. I downloaded everything. Thousands of posts, user logs, payout statements, all linked to her. Then I scheduled a data drop. Every file, every username, every transaction. And I didn't send it to the police first. I sent it to every journalist, watchdog group, and advocacy organization that fought against image-based exploitation. It was a digital nuke, undeniable, time-stamped, archived. When it hit hard. Within 12 hours, her name was trending worldwide. Her face, her voice, her coaching posts, every single thing she'd ever said in that forum was public record. The same internet she'd used to destroy people's privacy was now the weapon that dismantled her. And she couldn't hide behind her brother anymore. Because by then, he'd already flipped on her. Ryan turned state's evidence in exchange for a lighter sentence. And the testimony he gave against his sister was worse than anything I could have imagined. He said she'd started the entire operation. He said she'd filmed the first videos. He said she'd taught him how to hide the cameras. But what chilled me most, what I'll never forget, was what he said next. She told me people aren't real unless someone's watching. The day of the pretrial hearing, I sat in the hallway outside the courtroom watching Ryan shuffle past in shackles. I thought I'd feel satisfaction. Instead, I felt nothing, just the kind of empty that comes after you've spent all your emotion and what's left is dust. Then Jen walked in. No cuffs. Just her black blazer, perfectly pressed, chin high, acting like she was the CEO of something instead of the architect of people's worst nightmares. She looked right at me, eyes flat, almost amused. I expected her to look nervous or guilty, but she wasn't either. She was curious, like she was studying me for later. When our eyes met, she smiled and mouthed, "You're welcome." That's when I knew she wasn't sorry, not even close. Later that afternoon, Detective Reeves called me into a side room. "Sit down," she said softly. "There's something you need to hear. You don't have to, but I think you'll want to understand what you're dealing with." She pressed play on an interview recording from Jen's second interrogation. At first, it was just static and a few soft questions, routine stuff. Then Jen's voice came through, calm and casual, like she was being interviewed for a podcast. "Why'd you start recording people, Jen?" A pause. Then her voice. "Because no one ever watches women until they're naked or dying." Silence in the room. Reeves didn't look at me. She just kept playing it. "I figured if the world only values women when they're being consumed, then I'd rather be the one doing the consuming." "So this was about control?" "No," she said. "It was about proof. Proof that everyone is just waiting to be content. The only difference between me and the rest of them is I stopped pretending it's wrong." That line, the coldness of it, hit me harder than any insult Ryan had ever thrown. Reeves paused the recording and looked up. "She doesn't think she's a criminal, she thinks she's telling some kind of truth about the world." I swallowed hard. "What happens to someone like that?" Reeves said. "If we can prove distribution, she'll do time. But people like her, they always think they're the ones writing the story." That night, I went home and sat on my bed, the same one where everything had started, and listened to the rest of the tape. In it, Jen talked about how she and Ryan started filming together, how she'd taught him how to edit, how to hide metadata, how to market it as authentic intimacy. But then she said something that made my skin crawl. "You know why people watch the most? Because she, meaning me, looked genuine. Everyone else played for the camera. She didn't even know it was there. People love what's real. That's the secret." I remember whispering out loud, "I was real because I was betrayed." And in that moment, I realized the horrifying reason behind everything she did. Jen didn't just exploit people for money. She believed she was revealing something true about them, that she was exposing authenticity in its purest form, people stripped of performance, unaware of being observed. She saw humiliation as honesty. She saw privacy as fiction. And that belief, cold, calculated, and philosophical in its own twisted way, was what made her so much worse than Ryan. He was greedy. She was ideological. She didn't record for pleasure or profit. She recorded because she wanted to prove that control was an illusion, that everyone, eventually, becomes an image for someone else's consumption. I started digging again, not for evidence this time, but for understanding. Her college thesis, Erin found it through public archives, was titled "The Surveillance of the Self: Visibility as Validation in Digital Culture." It was basically a manifesto. Pages and pages about how people only exist through documentation, how privacy is an outdated myth, and how the camera levels the power dynamic by forcing people into honesty. At the end, she'd written one line that I'll never forget. "If God is omniscient, then cameras are modern divinity." She believed what she was doing was godlike. That was the dramatic reason. The thing that explained her cold smile, her arrogance, her lack of remorse. She didn't see herself as a predator. She saw herself as a philosopher, proving that no one is innocent because everyone is watching or being watched. She'd built her life around that belief, and Ryan had been her first experiment. He wasn't her accomplice. He was her creation. He'd grown up idolizing her, desperate for approval. She'd weaponized that, told him that recording people was art, that capturing someone's unfiltered reactions was the purest form of truth. She'd molded him into the perfect pawn. Every woman he recorded, every clip he uploaded, every dollar he made, it all traced back to her ideas. She was the mind, he was the muscle. And I was just the first one to drag her into the light. When the tape ended, I sat there in silence. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt haunted. Because in a small, terrifying way, she was right about one thing. Once your privacy is gone, you can't ever fully get it back. Once you've been seen without permission, you're never unseen. Even now, I still feel that invisible audience, that phantom gaze she built. But here's what she didn't account for, what she never saw coming. She believed exposure was power, but she forgot that it works both ways. She believed no one could control the narrative, but I'd already taken it back, by telling it myself, by naming her, by refusing to let shame silence me. Because the difference between her watching and me speaking is simple. She did it to erase people. I did it to make sure no one could erase me again. And that realization was the calm before the last storm. Because the final act of revenge wasn't public, viral, or loud. It was personal. It was private. And it was going to make her feel what she'd made all of us feel, exposed, powerless, and utterly alone. They arraigned her 3 months after I first posted. By then the story had mushroomed into something that didn't look like my life anymore. News vans at the courthouse, picket signs from advocacy groups, hashtags turned into op-eds. I learned to live with cameras the way you learn to live with broken glass. You notice every step you take, and your feet remember the cut. But I also learned something else. The cameras weren't the point anymore. The point was accountability. The point was that someone had to be the mirror for what they did. When Jen walked into the courtroom on that gray Monday, she carried herself like a woman exempt from consequence. Same black blazer, same half-smile, but there was a new tension to her, an almost bored way she set her jaw, like she was annoyed by drama. She expected this to be another performance she could manipulate. Maybe she thought she'd read our outrage like a script, flip it, and walk away with her reputation slightly singed but essentially intact. She was wrong. The prosecution's case was surgical. Detective Reeves had built it like a ledger. Metadata, bank transfers, user logs pulled from servers, corroboration from victims across state lines, voice memos, and emails in which Jen explicitly instructed contributors on how to avoid traceable payments. They had Ryan's admissions. They had the flash drives. They had dozens of women willing to testify. I watched them call witnesses in one by one. I watched each woman who once trembled with shame find a voice that refused to be quiet. When I sat on the witness stand, my hands were steady. I had rehearsed nothing. The truth doesn't rehearse. I told them about the lamp. I told them about the folder names, the pay stubs, the messages where he bragged he'd get her before she got boring. I told them about Jen's text where she warned me not to post because this goes beyond Ryan. I told them how the receipts traced back to her accounts, how her forum handle administered a network of predators, how she coached men to erase metadata the way she coached them to erase conscience. People say testifying reopens wounds. It does, but it also disinfects. Saying it out loud under oath made the timeline real in a way that a viral post never could. The judge's eyes were flat and unreadable. Jen's face was the kind that finally had cracks. For the first time since I'd met her, I saw panic. Her lawyer launched every defense that money and training could buy. Alternative explanations. Misattributed files. Digital forgery. He called me a vengeful ex with a grudge. He played snippets of recorded conversations cut out of context and tried to frame me as the manipulative one. It was grotesque, watching someone trained in persuasion try to rewrite what my life had been. But the evidence is greedy. It doesn't bend easily. When they played the forum voice memos, Jen's laugh, her instructions, the line about people not being real unless someone's watching. The courtroom was silent in a way that felt like a held breath released. You couldn't listen to that and come away thinking she was a victim of anything but herself. The jury took less than a day. Guilty on multiple counts. Voyeurism, distribution of intimate images without consent, conspiracy, and money laundering through digital accounts. The sentence was long enough that "life won't look like it used to" was not an empty phrase. When the judge read it aloud, Jen's composure finally surrendered. She stared at me with something like hatred, but mostly like confusion. How could this be happening to her? Outside the courthouse, reporters crowded me until my phone rang off the hook. Advocacy groups wanted interviews. Producers wanted opinions. I said some of it. I declined most. I refused to let the story be about me as a spectacle another time. I said what needed saying. About consent, about how people profit off the cruelty of secrecy, about how content is not a magic word that erases the harm done to real people. What I did with the rest of my power was quieter, and in the end, the thing that settled the ache in my chest more than anything public could. I spent months working with the women in our group chat. We organized resources. We compiled evidence packets for other victims who still wanted to pursue charges. We met with lawmakers, testified at hearings about closing loopholes in voyeurism laws. We opened a fund to help people with therapy and legal fees. Revenge had started as a hot, personal thing. It became a responsibility. I didn't want anyone else to go through the particular betrayal I'd experienced, where your privacy is sold on the same market as socks and streaming subscriptions. Legally, Ryan cooperated as part of a plea deal. He testified against Jen in exchange for a reduced sentence. The tabloids delighted in the turnabout. Brother turns on sister. But the thing that struck me hardest was how small he looked in court compared to how towering he'd seemed in my apartment midnight after midnight. Standing there, boots scuffed and shoulders hunched, he read from his prepared statement with a voice that had the texture of someone who'd been emptied out. "People aren't real unless someone's watching," he said, quoting his sister. The judge didn't laugh. The world didn't applaud. The phrase that once sounded like performance art now sounded like a confession. He had become the instrument of her ideology, and then, conveniently, the scapegoat when the music stopped. His mother, at first, had raged and defended both of them. How could you not defend your child? But the money traced through her accounts, too. The house upgrades, the new car payments, the vacations. They'd all been laundered through a network that, in one way or another, fed her lifestyle. She retreated into a kind of grief that looked more like protective fury than sorrow. When she finally wrote publicly, an apology that read like someone trying to stitch her reputation back together, most people treated it as lifeless noise. I never responded. Forgiveness didn't feel like mine to give. There were darker, quieter acts that exacted the kind of justice you can't get from a court. Jen was fired from the boutique PR firm where she'd coached influencers. She lost her contracts, her side gigs, and the consultancy that had been her cover. Her forums were scrubbed, not by the internet gods, but by 1,000 outraged users forcing platforms to act. Sponsors blacklisted anything associated with her brand. The community she built turned around and gaslit her with the same tools she'd used on others: exposure and exclusion. She became, ironically, hyper-visible and utterly isolated. I didn't celebrate that. I didn't dance on her grave. I watched it happen with a kind of clinical acknowledgement, like watching paint dry on a wall you'd already marked. It didn't erase the nights I'd spent vomiting from shame or the months I'd spent retracing every second of our life to find where the betrayal had begun. But it gave me something I hadn't allowed myself to name: control regained. The final piece of revenge was the smallest and oddest. A year after the arrests, I returned to the place where it all began. The thrift store where I'd once bought a lamp, the park where he proposed, the coffee shop where we'd met. I sat at a table and wrote a short piece. No jagged edges, no theatrical flourish, just the facts and a warning. If someone tells you content is content, they're not making art. They're making commodity of you. I sent it to the paper that had first run Aaron's story. They published it on a quiet weekday. It didn't make the viral lists. It didn't need to. It landed where it needed to, in the hands of people who were listening. Months later, at a small fundraiser I helped organize for victims' legal aid, a woman I'd never met stood up in the crowd and read aloud the piece I'd written. People clapped. They passed the hat. She hugged me afterwards and said, "You saved me a year of doubt." That hug fixed something in me that no courthouse or prison sentence ever could. In the end, the revenge I wanted was never purely to punish. It was to undo the invisibility they'd tried to create, to make sure that the record showed exactly what happened, that future patrons of authentic content would think twice, that the law would have more teeth. I wanted my name to be on the record not as a joke in a chat room or a thumbnail, but as a witness. The rest, watching Jen's life unspool, watching Ryan shrink, was collateral to the larger thing: prevention. Closure is a thin thing. Sometimes it's a verdict. Sometimes it's a donation check. Sometimes it's a stranger's gratitude. For me, it came in small doses. Emails from women thanking me for the courage to speak, A legislative amendment passed in Tennessee that made distribution penalties harsher. A quieter sleep some nights without the feeling of being watched. On the day Jen was sentenced, I stood outside the courthouse in the rain and thought about that picnic blanket, about the ring in Percy Warner Park, about the lamp with the tiny black eye in its base. I let the rain on my face feel like something other than tears. I thought of the last thing she ever mouthed to me before the trial, "You're welcome." I smiled then, because the irony was clean and exact. "You're welcome," I thought back. Then I stepped into the street and walked away from the house that had been our home, lighter in the way only someone who has reclaimed their story can be. Justice didn't heal everything. It never will. But it turned the cameras back on the people who'd used them, and that small, stubborn, absolutely human was enough. And in case anyone still thinks content is content, remember this. If your life becomes product, someone's going to want a refund.